In today's Advent calendar, we're going to be talking about... Oh, what's happening? Yeah, everything's getting all cold and desaturated. This sort of thing doesn't usually happen until the Ghost of Christmas Future gets here. I get the feeling things are about to get really dark and, gritty. Born in Ely, Cambridgeshire, England in 1967, Guy Edward Pearce was the son of Anne Cocking Pickering, a schoolteacher, and Stuart Pearce, a Royal New Zealand Air Force pilot and a Royal Air Force test pilot. Guy was only 3 when his family relocated to Geelong, Victoria, Australia, after his father was offered the position of chief test pilot for the Australian government. 5 years later, his father was killed in a test flight, and Guy's mother was left to raise him and his older sister Tracy as a single parent. In school, Guy had little interest in math and science, and preferred to focus on drama, art, and music. He worked with local dramatic groups in the standard slate of childhood theater roles, and in his teens, began competing as an amateur bodybuilder. At the age of 16, he won the title of Junior Mr. Victoria, and 2 years later he would begin appearing on the Australian soap opera Neighbours as the character Mike Young. His first appearance on the show came just 2 days after his final high school exam. He would spend 4 years on the soap, and in 1990 he would appear in his first film, Heaven Tonight, the first of 3 films he would star in for director, producer, writer Frank Howson. In 1991, Howson would pay for Pearce to attend the Cannes Film Festival to attend the premiere of Hunting, their second film working together, and Pearce, at the time mostly unknown outside of the Australian scene, would catch the eye of the international entertainment industry. His first international breakthrough role would come in 1994, playing drag queen Felicia in The Adventures of Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. At the same time, American viewers of the Family Channel came to know him as one of the stars of the Australian import Snowy River: The McGregor Saga. While Pearce has since become a Hollywood favorite, appearing in LA Confidential, Rules of Engagement, and The Time Machine, as well as starring in Christopher Nolan's sophomore feature Memento, and turning down the opportunity to play Marvel's Daredevil, a role that was ultimately picked up by Ben Affleck, he has continued working with the Australian film industry, appearing in films like The Hard Word and Nick Cave's The Proposition. In 2009, he ended a 7-year-long break from live performance by appearing in Poor Boy with the Melbourne Theatre Company. He would win a Primetime Emmy in 2011 for his role in Mildred Pierce. In 2012, he would star in a miniseries for Australian television, playing Peter Temple's detective, Jack Irish. In 2014, Guy released his first album of original music, Broken Bones, at the same time appearing in the documentary Neighbours 30th, The Stars Reunite. His second album, The Nomad, debuted in 2018, and he would also provide music for the movie A Slipping Down Life, in which he would play fictional musician Drumstrings Casey. 3 of Pearce's movies have been selected for the National Film Registry for their cultural, historical, or aesthetic significance: LA Confidential, Memento, and The Hurt Locker.
Still with the ribbon and bell my sister put around your neck. So you are the spirit I was promised. last.
Hey, light the lamp, not the rat, light the lamp, not the rat!
Basic cable channel FX launched in 1994 as a very different creature from its current form. Broadcasting from an apartment in the Flatiron District, FX, owned by 20th Century Fox, was supposed to be an experiment in interactive television. The programming consisted mostly of classic TV reruns, interspersed with live programming directly from the apartment. The internet was still in its infancy at the time, but FX's programming bought into email and the World Wide Web big time, with almost all of its live chat shows taking questions from viewers on the air through their contact email addresses. Viewers who interacted with the channel could be selected for the opportunity to visit the apartment for a day, where they would appear in all of the channel's live programming. The channel was far ahead of its time, and over its first 3 years, the live programming was gradually phased out, with the schedule relying increasingly on its slate of classic TV reruns. The final live program, Personal FX, was canceled in 1998, signaling the completion of an FX rebranding, and the apartment was officially vacated. The channel was now FX Fox Gone Cable. The programming was still mostly reruns, but specifically focusing on Fox-produced shows, including MASH, The X-Files, and Buffy the Vampire Slayer. Its first slates of original programming following the rebrand would only last a year for each program, including the Bobcat Goldthwait-hosted Bobcat's Big Ass Show and instant comedy with the Groundlings, as well as the Howard Stern-produced Baywatch spoof, Son of the Beach. FX wouldn't really find its stride until 2002 with its breakout original programming hit, The Shield. The gritty police drama nudged past the lines of acceptable content for network television, creating a sort of HBO Light style of programming. The Shield would be joined quickly by plastic surgery drama Nip Tuck and the Dennis Leary fireman drama Rescue Me. The dramas drew fire from public morality watchdogs, but were praised by critics and audiences. Since then, the channel has remained a home for edgier television offerings, even as Fox was purchased by Disney in 2019. The FX brand is associated with taking risks and doing things you won't see on other television channels. In 2017, FX announced that it and the BBC had commissioned a script for a new adaptation of Dickens's A Christmas Carol from Edgar Award-winning screenwriter Stephen Knight. Knight, best known for writing Eastern Promises and Dirty Pretty Things, would also act as an executive producer on the adaptation alongside Tom Hardy and Ridley Scott. Given the work of all three executive producers, it was easy to see that this was going to be a darker, grittier take on the story. Guy Pearce would be announced as starring in the role of Scrooge in January of 2019. Also announced in the cast was Rutger Hauer as the Ghost of Christmas Yet to Come, but Hauer would later drop out due to his failing health. Filming began in May 2019 at locations including Raynham Hall, Lord Leicester Hospital in Warwick, and Church Row, Hampstead. Filming would wrap in June. On FX, the program would air in a single night, running 173 minutes and debuting on December 19, 2019. The BBC, meanwhile, would divide the program into 3 chapters and air it on the nights from December 22nd to December 24th. The BBC provides solid numbers for the debuts of the first 2 episodes, showing that the first episode was watched by 7.83 million viewers. The second episode dropped in viewership to 6.01 million. The third and final installment has no specific numbers reported because it missed the mark to qualify as one of the top 15 programs of the week. British critics were largely positive, praising Pearce's performance, although many did express misgivings about the show's darker tone. American critics were much less welcoming, describing it as dour and joyless, with Salon calling it short on joy and very, very, very long on purgatorial slogging. As with much of FX's programming, the complete production is available to stream on Hulu.
4 calls, 21 steps of the hoof, 9 turns of the wheel. 2 from Chestnut. Oh, damn it. 5 calls, 27 steps of the horse, 11 turns of the wheel.
Guy Pearce's Scrooge asks the question that very few people have ever asked. What if Scrooge was a psychopath, just one step short of a serial killer? Brooding and intense, he engages in straight-up sociopathic behavior, like coldly and methodically recording every movement on his street so that he can complain to the city about the noise caused by street vendors in a commercial district. As befits his dark and gritty nature, he dines alone at home. In what appears to be a dark and serious take on Tom Mula's comedy play Jacob Marley's Christmas Carol, a large part of the show seems to be concerned with Jacob Marley's ultimate fate, as his redemption or damnation hinges on whether or not Scrooge can see the error of his ways. But in place of Marley's fellow desperate spirits, we instead get Marley forcing Scrooge to experience the violence and distress of an industrial accident caused by his own greed. Want to add grittiness and darkness to a story in the 21st century? Then add a dash of sexual trauma. Being alone at a boarding school on Christmas because your father is cold and distant apparently isn't depressing enough, especially when you could be alone at a boarding school on Christmas because your father is actually pimping you out to the headmaster in exchange for getting your tuition for free. Thank goodness this version of Scrooge's sister Fan, or as she's called in this version, Lottie, is a pistol-packin' mama. Merry Christmas, you gun-crazy ol' America.
It is the American way.
Scrooge's past is relentlessly grim. Forget about Fezziwig's Christmas party. Instead, we get to see mine collapses, hostile takeovers, and Scrooge offering Mrs. Cratchit the money she needs for her child's treatment if she will agree to grant him sexual favors, but then revealing he has no intention of actually taking those favors, instead holding the fact that she was willing to do so over her head to blackmail her into convincing Bob to continue to accept pennies for his work. It's possible to overcorrect for ensuring A Christmas Carol is political enough, you guys. The Ghost of Christmas Present opts not for two small children to represent want and ignorance. Instead, she issues a dire warning that the Ghost of Christmas Future is the one who decides. You would expect such a grim, desperate take on the story to end with Scrooge being cast into his grave. But instead we're treated to a pensive, thoughtful moment in the graveyard after he watches Tiny Tim drown in a frozen-over skating pond. And that graveyard is where Scrooge finds himself on Christmas morning before hustling to the pond where Tim drowned to spread gravel over the surface so that nobody can fall through the ice. Then it's off to the Cratchits, not to deliver a turkey as big as a London street urchin, but rather to let Mrs. Cratchit know that, nudge nudge, wink wink, there is nothing to fear from Bob accepting a job with a different office. While this is a redeemed Scrooge at the end, it feels like the writers are well aware that they have created a version of the character who can never quite be washed clean. He's done too much that's unforgivable and has too much blood on his hands. So instead of a grandly reformed Scrooge determined to keep Christmas in his heart every day, we get a Scrooge who says he doesn't expect forgiveness. Instead, he will be determined to try to do small acts of kindness in the hopes that he can at least make the world a little better than he has already made it. And that's all right. I'll admit, I think you need hope in A Christmas Carol. I think you need a little bit of joy that can be held onto. And I think it's a good idea to have the idea that redemption can take work and dedication, but it is possible. A lot of versions of A Christmas Carol over the years have lightened and softened the story, but it is possible to go too far over the edge in the other direction. But what do you think of Guy Pearce's take on Ebenezer Scrooge in this dark and gritty version for television? Drop down into the comments and let me know. While you're there, make certain that you hit that like and subscribe button. Make certain you also hit the bell next to subscribe. That way you get notifications every time there's a brand new video on the channel. There's also a share button so that you can share this video with your friends. After all, sharing is caring. If you want to see more of the film Optimist, the Advent Calendar of Scrooges starts at the link over there. And up here we have a link to my Halloween countdown of Draculas. Until next time, watch like it means something.